Can you imagine having a horse that you can do anything on? One that's soft, responsive, and you can move it exactly where you want to, when you want it to? In today's video, I'm going to share with you 4 maneuvers that we teach our horses so that they are soft, responsive, and confident in doing anything we ask them. And number 1, put simply, is where we bend our horse's head around, keep their front feet pretty much where they start, and move their back end around. I'm going to pick up the reins, and so I'm going to bend his head around this way and move his butt, and I want to keep his front feet standing about right where they started. So he's moving around a little bit, but for the most part, he's doing a good job. So he bends his head in, not too hard, but he kind of drills a hole in the ground with his front left foot. Now, if I go the other way, I want him to be able to do it both directions. So I go here, and his right front foot is going to stay pretty much where it's at, and his butt is going to be moving around. So this motion is really helpful on the ranch. If we get a horse that starts to bucking, if we get a horse that gets out of hand, this is foundational, right? If my horse gets out of control and I bend his neck at all and move his back end, what it does is it twists their spine. So they cannot do anything really crazy when their spine is a little bit crooked. So number 2 is what we call a counter arc. So if I'm going to be moving him to the right, I'm going to arc his head and his neck to the left right here. And then I'm going to pick like a 10 or 15 foot circle, and his front feet are going to move faster than his hind feet. So I'm going to move him around right here, where I'm going to arc his head to the left and move his front feet around to the right. And I kind of want to keep a forward motion here, but what this does is it causes a crossover. So his front feet, his left front foot is going to cross over the front of the other foot. So I'll show you the other direction as well. So I'm going to arc his head and his neck, and then I'm going to cause him to do that crossover right there. And this counter arc is super important because later on, if we're roping a cow, we want to be able to move his shoulders over at a high speed. When we're first working on this with a horse, or just barely, if we were to look at the ground, there should be 2 sets of tracks. So there should be a smaller circle, which would make like a 6-foot circle. That's his back feet moving around that circle. And then his front feet, they're going to be moving faster, and they're going to make it like a 10 to 15-foot circle. That's a good indicator if you're doing it right. If you have a freshly tilled arena, or if you're out on the ranch, you can kind of see that circle that you're creating. Before we move on to the number 3, we want to make sure that we can do that motion right there. The same number 2 right here, and then we're going to get him to go almost backward and around. A number 3, put simply, is to make sure the horse's shoulders follow their nose. This number 2 really leads us into number 3. So the number 3 is like a turnaround. So we're going to plant his back feet, or one of his back feet, and we're going to have him step over and move around. So a lot of people do this as the spinning in the competitions and whatnot. So when I like to first start this, we started off by doing this motion with the number 1, and then when we're training horse, we bring him into a number 2 right here, and then instead of counter arcing, I'm going to allow his head to turn to the direction I'm going. So if I'm going to the right, his head's going to be able to turn to the right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow him to cross over and make just a circle with his front feet. So this motion comes from hours and hours of working the first 2 fundamentals, and then including this one right here. So if I was to do a 2 or a counter arc, I'm counter arcing him this way, and then I allow his head, and I'm going to kick his butt underneath him right here, and I am going to allow his head to straighten up. so I no longer have to arc his head the wrong direction. Part of the number 3 that we haven't talked about yet is sort of setting us up for a cow turn. So if I'm going down the fence, or if I'm cutting a cow in the corral, in the arena, I want to be able to do this maneuver right here. So we worked on having our horse's front end come around sort of like this for our number 3. Now, I want to do that in a backwards motion. So we're teaching him to go here, get his back end out of the way, and move his front end around. And this one's super important because his back end needs to be able to get out when we're cutting a cow real quick. So he's backing up and his front end's going around. And then when I come here and step across, like if I'm working on a cow here, he comes across really quickly. So what we're teaching him there is to get his back end out of the way of his front end as his front end comes around. If you find your horse and you're trying to do a number 3 and they get really washy with their back end, if they're moving their back end a lot, the number 4 really helps us out right here. So a number 4 is we're going to arc our horse's head in the direction, and then we're going to move their butt and their hind end in the same direction that their horse, or that their head is arcing. So in this example, I have my horse's head arced a little bit to the left. I am going to move his hind quarters up underneath himself right here. So if I was trying to do a number 3 and I let my horse turn around right here, and let's say he gets really washy right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that circle, I'm going to kick his butt in, and then I'm going to step him forward a little bit and allow him to turn around right there. So a number 1 sets us up for a number 2, a number 2 sets us up for a number 3, and a number 4 really helps our number 3. If we're in a situation on the ranch and we have a cow on the end of a rope, we want to be able to move our horse left and right with ease, right? If I'm coming up on a cow and she starts going a certain direction, I need to be able to move my horse's shoulders over. Or if I've got a cow roped and she's laying on the ground and my horse's butt is kind of off to the side, I need to be able to move his butt over. A good piece of advice that we could give you: the first thing you do, make sure you can at least do a 1. If you can get a 1 on a horse, most of the time people put too much bit in a horse's mouth. So be very careful that you're not trying to over bend their neck right here. Because if I'm trying to bend his neck right here, like I have a horse in a snaffle bit, now he's really trained so he does it, but a lot of the time that big long shank is just going to poke him in the cheek, and it's going to cause him to gape his mouth open and tilt his head and flip his head around. So don't worry about bending his neck too far. We just want to bend his neck a little bit and then be able to keep his front foot right there and move his back end. So this motion is going to save you when you're riding. If you got a horse that won't stop, just bend their neck a little bit and turn them into this little 1 right here. Now that is going to stop a horse pretty quick because you disengage their hind quarters. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you learned anything at all, let us know down in the comments. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. This next week, we're hosting our very first Ranch Hand Academy here at our ranch in Emory, Utah. If you missed out on this one, make sure you get signed up for our next one. We'll be putting the dates in the description down below.